Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're definitively unpacking the biological framework of human stress, nervous system regulation, and sleep optimization. You see, the human nervous system and our sleep architecture are fundamentally two sides of the exact same biological coin. To master one, you absolutely have to understand the other. Today, we're moving way past basic psychology to explore the deep molecular, endocrine, and physiological machinery that actually dictates our cellular health and our longevity.
You know, we often think of stress as this abstract, floating emotion, or maybe just a psychological burden. But the reality is far more profound than that. Stress is a hardwired, highly physical cascade of hormones and neurotransmitters that literally alters your cellular aging process and dramatically dictates the quality of your sleep. But here's the incredible news. We aren't just at the mercy of this automatic survival response. We can consciously override this physiological cascade using specific, measurable interventions that rewrite our neurobiology from the inside out.
Here is how we're going to break this all down today. First, we'll look at the anatomy of the stress response, followed by the cortisol awakening response, then top-down meditation signatures, bottom-up vagus nerve action, and finally, engineering calm through breath. All right, let's jump right into Section 1, the anatomy of the stress response. To really grasp how our physiology can break down under pressure, we have to look at the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal, or HPA axis. This is essentially the central hormonal command center for your body's stress response. When we perceive persistent threats, this axis drives a state of what's called allostatic overload. At a cellular level, this means continuous oxidative stress, profound mitochondrial dysfunction, and systemic inflammation. Crucially, a hyperactive HPA axis will completely fragment your sleep architecture, which prevents your brain from ever reaching those deep, restorative phases of rest we all desperately need.
It's a fascinating biological cascade that starts deep in your brain. A perceived threat signals the hypothalamus to release corticotropin-releasing hormone, or CRH. This triggers the pituitary gland to secrete ACTH, which then travels through the bloodstream all the way down to your adrenal glands, forcing them to pump out cortisol. That cortisol binds to glucocorticoid receptors throughout your body, raising blood sugar and putting your cellular machinery on high alert. Now, this is a brilliant evolutionary mechanism if you're trying to survive a predator. But when it's activated nightly by modern everyday stressors, it actively blocks the biological onset of sleep.
Moving on to Section 2, the cortisol awakening response, and how this becomes the ultimate biomarker for resilience.
Get this. A healthy human nervous system is evolutionarily designed to experience a massive cortisol spike. We're talking 38 to 75% within the very first 30 to 45 minutes of waking up. This sharp morning spike is biologically necessary. It rapidly clears adenosine, which is the chemical that creates sleep pressure, right out of your brain. Plus, it aggressively primes your immune function, your cellular energetics, and your cognitive readiness for the day ahead. What you want to see is this healthy, acute spike that rises sharply from your waking baseline and then steadily, predictably drops off into the evening, hitting its lowest point right before bed. This curve is intimately tied to your circadian biology. When this natural diurnal rhythm gets flattened or inverted by chronic stress, it absolutely destroys your body's ability to release melatonin. A flat cortisol curve is exactly what leaves you feeling wired but entirely exhausted at night and totally incapable of accessing slow-wave sleep. So, the crucial takeaway here? Cortisol itself is absolutely not a villain. Its rate of change is what dictates your systemic health. A blunted awakening response indicates profound endocrine exhaustion, pointing to severe burnout where your cellular engines essentially refuse to fire. On the flip side, an exaggerated massive spike reveals chronic anxiety and sympathetic hyperreactivity. Achieving that perfect dynamic biological rhythm is the absolute foundation of daytime energy and nighttime cellular recovery.
Section 3. Top-down, meditations, neural signatures. Now we can start engineering our biological interventions. Before we even get to specific practices, we really need to talk about the default mode network, or DMN. Because the human brain evolved to constantly scan for danger, it often fails to distinguish between a real physical threat and a perceived mental threat, like anxiety over tomorrow's schedule. Chronic rumination in the DMN keeps your HPA axis continuously triggered. If your default mode network is hyperconnected and overactive, that resulting neurochemical cascade will entirely block your biological transition into restful sleep. Now, science makes a really vital distinction here between different meditation styles and their neurological impacts.
Mindfulness trains effortful attention by repeatedly returning your focus to the present, which heavily engages the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, the area governing executive control. Transcendental meditation, however, functions through a completely different neural pathway. It allows the mind to effortlessly settle into a state of alert rest, engaging the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, which is a region deeply associated with emotional regulation and dampening your fear response.
And these distinct practices generate completely different EEG, or brainwave signatures. Mindfulness triggers localized gamma and theta waves, which are associated with heightened active focus and cognitive processing. Transcendental meditation generates alpha coherence across the entire brain, signaling deep, global parasympathetic rest. This neurobiological data proves that meditation isn't just one big monolithic concept. These are distinct, highly specific tools engineered for entirely different biological outcomes.
But here's where it gets truly mind-blowing. When practiced consistently over months, these top-down interventions structurally rewire the physical architecture of your brain. They tangibly increase the thickness of your prefrontal cortex, the logical executive center, while actively shrinking the amygdala, your brain's primary fear center. This strengthens the functional neurocoupling between the two, allowing your advanced thinking brain to release inhibitory neurotransmitters like GABA. Those neurotransmitters chemically silence the amygdala's alarm bells, finally making restorative sleep possible.
Look at this insight from extensive meta-analyses. If your system is stuck in allostatic overload or you're dealing with physical illness, top-down cognitive overrides act as a literal biological brake pedal on your endocrine system. It systematically drives down systemic cortisol. And this reduction isn't merely about feeling relaxed. It actively reduces systemic inflammation, promotes healthy cellular aging, and restores the exact hormonal balance required for deep sleep recovery. All right, Section 4, Bottom-up Regulation via the vagus nerve. Let's look at how the body can command the brain. Let's dive into the vagus nerve. Think of it as this immense, bidirectional superhighway for your parasympathetic nervous system, wandering all the way from your brainstem down through the major organs of your torso. Fascinatingly, over 80% of these nerve fibers are afferent, meaning they carry information from the body up to the brain. The absolute strongest, most immediate signals telling your brain that you are safe enough to initiate sleep actually originate right in the expansion and contraction of your lungs. And the biological trigger to activate this pathway? It lies entirely in your respiratory mechanics. Specifically, it is the out-breath, the exhalation phase, that forces the vagus nerve to release a powerful neurotransmitter called acetylcholine. So if you want to hijack your autonomic nervous system and bypass the conscious mind entirely, mastering the length, smoothness, and quality of your exhale is the undisputed physiological key.
Acetylcholine is basically your body's systemic brake pedal. Once released, it binds to receptors that instantly slow your heart rate and manage your blood pressure via the baroreflex. Crucially, it also activates the cholinergic anti-inflammatory pathway, shutting down the production of inflammatory cytokines. This biological shift effectively terminates the HPA axis cascade we talked about earlier, paving the way for the brain's glymphatic system to clear out cellular waste during the night.
Which brings us to Section 5, Engineering Calm Through Breath. Let's look at the actual protocols.
We can literally use mathematical breathing techniques to directly hack our autonomic nervous system. Take box breathing, for instance. It mathematically trains the brain to tolerate stillness. By utilizing a perfectly even rhythm of 4 counts to inhale, hold, exhale, and pause, you're sending a structured, highly rhythmic signal of safety right to your brainstem. This balances the levels of carbon dioxide and oxygen in your blood, making it an incredibly precise tool to rapidly shut down acute sympathetic arousal and panic in real time.
Now, if your goal is to rapidly force a profound parasympathetic downshift, specifically right before you try to sleep, the 4-7-8 method is biologically optimal. It intentionally leverages that extended 8-count exhalation to heavily stimulate your vagal tone. This floods your system with acetylcholine, forces the heart rate to steeply decelerate, and biologically transitions your brain waves from a highly active beta state into the slower frequencies required to enter restorative, slow-wave sleep. But for building long-term nervous system resilience, coherent breathing is the scientific gold standard. By breathing at a sustained rate of exactly 5 to 6 breaths per minute, you mathematically synchronize your respiratory rate with your heart rate variability and your baroreflex. Expanding your heart rate variability isn't just some basic relaxation metric. It is one of the most thoroughly validated biomarkers of physiological youth, cardiovascular efficiency, and overall longevity.
So let's tie this all together.
By combining top-down cognitive meditation to structurally rewire your brain's physical architecture with bottom-up vagal breathing to completely command your peripheral physiology, you hold the definitive tools to entirely reshape your stress response. You have the power to optimize your sleep architecture, dictate your cellular health, and deeply influence your own longevity. You are the engineer of your own resilience. The science is incredibly clear here. So if your breath is the remote control for your nervous system, how will you consciously program your biology today?